I first want to go ahead and introduce our bookseller co-host. So without further ado, to say a few words, we are so thrilled to be partnering for this event. Really, it's their event. It's BookWoman's event. We're only along for the ride. So Susan Post, I'm going to invite you to pop on and say a few words to our wonderful folks here.
Okay, so it's just audio and no video, or do you want me to?
You should have some, you can make your video. You can.
All right, Lori wants to see me, I know. So.
I know. You got to turn on your video, friend. Do you see where you can do stop?
Yes, I'm doing that, but it's saying I can't. So someone has to allow me.
Oh my gosh. Evan, will you allow Susan to turn on her video, please?
So hi, Becca.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Evan. Hi, Laura. I'm so excited. This has been quite a whirlwind.
It is
up to this. I'm so excited.
We are thrilled to have you here, and I'm figuring out this little glitch. I'm so sorry that you're not able to turn on your video. Let me see.
Yeah, I've been so excited. It was hard to, get through the week. And I've seen so many people in the chat who bought books online or in person at BookWoman. And so I'm just going, yeah. It's so great. And so I feel it's so nice to be connected with a whole new community.
All right, Susan, you should be able to do it now. I just invited you to start your video.
Oh, okay. Start.
There it is. Look at all those books behind you.
Yeah, so I am the BookWoman, and I can't get away from books. So that makes me so happy. So I want to thank Amy for, first of all, for being our first and original angel, our pandemic angel. Amy really pushed us to excel. Amy pivoted and bought all her books, and it was the best cheerleader, the best book buyer, helped us curate mystery boxes, which we can still do. And also during the pandemic, Becca, we've gotten to know you and the Writers League, and I just can't think of a better partnership. You and me and Amy and Evan. Of course, we need Evan. And BookWoman just couldn't exist without our community, and I want to thank everyone who has been a supporter over the last 10 or 11 months. Hi, Amy. Yeah, and so I dressed in the colors too. Just for you.
Thanks, Susan. I'm muting again.
So I don't know. I didn't really prepare my notes. I kind of went over it with Becca. But also I wanted to tell Laura that I don't read very many mysteries, but I love yours. And my friend Lori and I fight over the arcs.
I bet you win, Susan.
Well, once I started reading them, yeah, I win now.
Well, and I'll just remind everyone that buying books is a great way to support authors, but it's also a great way to support independent bookstores. And BookWoman is a treasure here in Austin. We're so lucky to have you, Susan, to have your store. And we're going to keep throwing the link in the chat box tonight to make sure that folks who haven't picked up the books yet are able to link to your website directly and support BookWoman with every purchase.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I don't think I put pre-order on the website, but this is coming out in June, and I have some wonderful, wonderful book plates that Laura so generously, they're the most beautiful book plates I've ever seen. They're wonderful to hold. It's a beautiful signature. And this is some of the best writing you'll ever read. So
here.
That's my piece. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susan. And I promised that I would show folks. So we've got a tote bag because it's not publishing a literary event without a tote bag. You can win a tote bag. You can win some fun buttons. I'm not kidding, guys. You can win these sunglasses. These are like cool sunglasses. if I say so myself. But who cares about that stuff? I don't. You know what I care about? I'm going to win a copy of Bad Habits. Probably one of the best books you're going to read in a long, long time, guys. Oh, wait. I'm going to win a copy of My Life as a Villainess. What? An amazing collection of essays. Oh, no. Is there another Laura Lippman book in this pile? Lady in the Lake? What? And then there are also 2 copies. I'm losing my stuff. There are 2 copies of Amy's other books as well, like 1 copy of each of her other 2 books. But unfortunately, I keep them at my office because I'm always telling writers that they should be reading them and frankly copying what she does. So I don't have. There they are. John and Last Woman Standing. So before I turn it over, I just want to say one more time, thank you to all of you for being here. We're so excited to have you. You know, Susan called and asked if the Writers League could be a part of this, partly because just logistically, it was something that would be helpful to BookWoman. And when BookWoman calls you, you say yes. And then she said, oh, it's an event with Amy Gentry. And when you hear Amy Gentry's name, you say yes. And then Amy Gentry said, oh, and Laura Lippman's going to be there. And when you hear that, first you say, the Laura Lippman is going to be there. And then Amy Gentry says, yes. And then you say, I can't say yes anymore. We're doing it. So we are thrilled to be a part of this, but I'm really excited now to turn it over. You're going to hear a great conversation this evening. And then because we are all about the craft, we're going to bring it back and we're going to ask some questions to both of these authors as we wrap up at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to disappear and pass it over to our wonderful guest host and the person who's going to be facilitating this evening with our wonderful author, Laura Lippman. Take it away.
Hey, video working. I can't see myself, which is fine. I just want to make sure that everyone else can see me.
Yes.
I can't see Amy right now, but that's fine. As long as I can hear her.
I'm here.
Oh, wait. Okay, now I can see myself, and I'm going to see if I can go to there I go. Okay, now, hi, everybody.
Hi!
Congratulations on your publication launch for this amazing book. And I saw Sarah Weinman was one of the people who signed in tonight. And I remember really distinctly the very excited conversation. Sarah and I were kind of like, it wasn't really subtweeting because it was positive. We were sort of like, what's the opposite? I guess we were overt tweeting, like, oh my God, I just read this most amazing book. And it was your book, Bad Habits. This is your 3rd book. And I was really caught by a term that you used, which I'm now in love with. You call this a feminist thriller. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to start off talking about that term and why you use it and what it means. And I think we should all be using it. But anyway, please talk about a feminist thriller.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. And thanks, Becca and Writers League and like everybody in the chat. I just about lost my mind when I saw all the names. I started to tear up and cry because I've certainly never had this many people at a launch before, not at one event. So amazing. It feels incredible. It's like one of the few gifts of the pandemic, I think. So feminist thriller is something I call all of my books. And I think first and foremost, I just am a feminist and I write thrillers. So, but I guess that's not enough to take for granted that it would be a feminist thriller. But I approach every book with a problem in mind, I think. And I don't mean like a specific social ill so much, but a problem of character and I don't know, a quandary or a dilemma that women tend to face. And I don't know that I'm trying to do it every time, but that's just what I want to write about. I'm just more interested, at least for now, in women's problems than in men's problems. Because I think we've had a lot of those.
I emailed you earlier today and I said, one of the things that interests me about Bad Habits, and I'm not sure you agree, but I was like, the men are kind of side pieces. The men in Bad Habits, they have plot responsibilities. They're fully drawn characters, but the three women at the center of the book are so much more important than the men that come in and out of the story. And I had to feel that was quite deliberate.
I mean, I wish I could say it was deliberate. I think it's just what happens every time. I have been told, I mean, I've been called on the carpet for this before. People have asked me when I'm going to write an interesting male character, and all I can say is I don't know. I got a lot of ladies to get through first. I don't.
I mean, no, men are totally interesting, and I think that's, oh God. Are we all asked that question? Are we all asked, when are you going to write about a man? And I say this as someone who finally wrote a book about a man, it's the book that's out this year. But it's so interesting that men as readers are so very conscious when they're absent. And it's like the world has gone wrong. Where are we? Why are we not at the center of the story? What's going on here? And I feel like your book is very much a reply to that kind of sensibility.
Well, I mean, there have been a lot of stories about men. There's just been a lot of them, And I mean, I think there have been many amazing stories about women too. Many of them, unfortunately, took place during centuries where there weren't a lot of options for women. And so marriage was, often the big plot, or the failure to marry, and these are all amazing books, but yeah, I think there's a lot to say about women's lives. And I also think, as many people have said before me, and me as well, that women's lives are kind of scary and a little bit thrilling, and that therefore the thriller form is really well suited to exploring female experience.
I mean, you've also written about how horror is a genre that is particularly suitable to writing about women's lives, to try to explain. I mean, I'm not being melodramatic, and I think you'll agree with me. It's like sort of moving through the world as a woman. You do inhabit a horror novel, and you do kind of inhabit a crime novel in a way that men just don't get, that you're making this endless number of calculations about your safety, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you have to be a kind of your own security guard or your own detective. I mean, you have to be on your guard all the time. Yeah, definitely. I think that's totally true.
And this also came up, and I went back and I read a lot of your Austrian Chronicle columns, and this idea, I wrote, our bodies are the evidence, and the fact that we move through this world. And I've recently become obsessed with the podcast Maintenance Phase, which is sort of revisiting all these things we think we know about obesity and cures. Mm-hmm. And it is true that we kind of move through the world in these vessels that are telling a story that might not be the right story. It's like people are projecting so much. But, so the thing that fascinated, so Bad Habits arrived, and it was like this great, I'm going to talk a teeny bit about blurbing because I love to do it, but at the same time, my reading is very selfish. My reading's for me. So it's like, I want to blurb, but I also want to read whatever I want to read exactly when I want to read it. So what you look for is that book that arrives in the mail, and you open it up and you read the first page. You're like, this is the book I want to read right now. And I had that wonderful experience with Bad Habits. And what was so interesting to me about Bad Habits is I'm reading it. I'm like, I don't know if this, it says a novel of suspense, it's built as a thriller. It's like, I don't actually know if this is a thriller, but I'm really cool with that because to me, this is very much a novel about academia, which is, of course, your background. You have a PhD in English literature. And I'd really love for you to talk about what you want. I've read a lot of novels about academia. I like them, especially when they're comedies, and this is anything but. And I'd love for you to talk about what you were trying to get at in writing about this pretty rarefied world that most of us who haven't been in it really don't know that much about.
Yeah, well, it's obviously it's an environment I know really well, having been there. It's also a pretty special one, it's a pressure cooker, it's a Shark Tank, it's a lot of things. It's a place where people are living out their ideals or trying to. They're living for something that's, you know, ineffable, but motivates them to abandon a normal life and a good paycheck, which I think as writers we can also understand, right? But so, you know, but it's also a tiny little clubby, you know, place where the hierarchy is really rigid too. The kind of structure of academia kind of lends itself to a lot of very interesting power dynamics that I was wanting to explore in this book. But I would have to say the way I thought of the book, or the way that the book came to me, was as a dream, which sounds very flaky, but the frame narrative, or what became the frame narrative, so the meeting in the hotel, it happens on the first page, and I'm happy to read that, like a few pages of that if you would like. But yeah, the idea of these two friends reuniting in the hotel lobby, and one of them is getting married and the other one wants to kill her. That was sort of what the dream was. And I recognize a seed when I see it, you know, but it needed a place to be. It needed, like, the question was, how did this happen? And how did this woman become the kind of person that wanted to kill this other woman? And I could only think of one place where that could happen, really, at least that I have familiarity with. And that was grad school, because I think the one time in my life when I have been in an environment with so much pressure, and so much, shall we say, not perfectly ideal behavior, was in grad school. That was my experience. And yeah, it seemed like a good pair. The making of a villain story is kind of, I mean, I call Bad Habits more than probably a thriller. It's the making of a villain.
The making of a villain. You've said you might come back to this character, right?
I want to.
Yeah. I'm up for it. I mean, I don't think that was something I guessed when I read the book, but then I found that I was like, yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, one of the things that was fascinating to me is that I'm reading this book, and it's a book that invites a lot of, this is a very high compliment. It's a book where the reader starts to project a lot of stuff. I mean, I think I know where I am, except you never actually tell me. I think I know what they're studying, except you never actually tell me. It was like, and there were moments where I was like, is this a real thing that people do in higher education? Or is it's like, it's just this fascinating world where it was like, I realized, first of all, how very little I knew about higher education. I mean, I only have an undergrad degree. I've never done any postgraduate work. And it really had that feel of, this is a world that you might think you know about, but you actually know nothing about. Yeah. Let me bring you in and show you what it's really like. And I really felt that was one of your goals, which is to show people what you called it, a Shark Tank.
Yeah.
But I was also fascinated by the fact that it's so anchored in Mac's need to make money. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about why that was so important to the book.
Sure.
That the quotidian, day in, day out of what it's going to take, those scenes in the restaurant, and how those are just seared into my memory of, like, you know, this is what it takes to make your nut. Was that, I always hate to ask this, it felt almost personal, like this was something you had lived, and I'm not sure you did or not. And that's,
well, I've certainly waited tables. I will just say I've waited a lot of tables. So yes, I have definitely lived that. And I have, yeah, I mean, I've definitely, like, sweated it out trying to make rent. I'm not anywhere near like Mac is, right? She has an actual serious set of issues in her family background. So, you know, she comes into this world in a much lower status position, I think, than certainly than I did, with a great deal of privilege when I came in. However, I think you are absolutely right. I mean, I'm glad you saw that that was one of the aims of the book, because I think the sense of disorientation is that's what I was going for on almost every page, right? It's about someone who comes into a world that she thinks she knows, and then once she's there, it turns out to be like Alice in Wonderland. Everybody is talking like, what? And this does actually mimic my experience of grad school in many ways, because I ended up there in a kind of an odd, almost accidental way. I don't want to say I followed a boy, but it played a small part in how I ended up in the situation to be in that program. And then once I was there, I just started, I got thrown into the deep end. I started swimming as fast as I could, and I made some headway very quickly and thought, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I just had no experience with that world at all. I think if you had asked me, like, what is going to graduate school, in my case, it was literature, but I'm sort of deliberately vague about this. it's a humanities program, basically. Some vague program. But part of that is because I think, my experience of being in grad school was just a slow unraveling of my understanding of what was even happening and what the discipline was. And there was so much excitement. The ideas were so exciting. And I tried to show that too. When Mac is listening to Bethany lecture, she's just like lost in this amazing tapestry of ideas. But then as soon as she leaves the room and Bethany stops talking, it just falls away and she has no footing. And so, that part of the experience is very similar to mine. And I enjoyed creating that environment for the reader. And I think it is a little bit, it was hard walking the line, because I think, I didn't want anyone to feel so lost that they just closed the book in frustration and went like, ugh, I don't want to go to grad school. Why am I reading this? But yeah, I wanted to kind of have just enough like satire, but it's close enough to the truth and there's actually real names and things mixed in sort of liberally, and that was a real pleasure for me to write, but it was hard to get the mix just right. So I'm glad it worked for you. I wanted you to feel confused, but not angry. That, and
totally worked for me. I mean, it was like a very freeing thing to say like, oh, here's a world I don't know at all. So this could all be true. It could all be made up, but it all works. So what do I care? I actually think that I saw in the chat, people really do want you to read. So I think this would be a good moment for you to read that opening.
Excellent. Okay, I would love to. All right. Bad habits, everyone. My first time with my reader's copy. All right. This is just the first part of the book. So December 29th, 2021, 8:15 p.m., Skyloft Hotel, Los Angeles. Gwen's perfect laugh reaches me from across the hotel lobby just as I step into the elevator. Through some acoustical trick of polished floors and curved walls, the unmistakable peals echo inside the elevator for a moment, a memory replayed in stereo. I turn just in time to catch a glimpse of her tossing her dark, glossy hair beneath a glinting halo of upside-down wine glasses at the hotel bar. 11th floor, I say. The grad student I picked up at the reception, all elbow-patched corduroy and absurd woolen scarf and lips pouting suggestively around the word Lukash, pushes the button. I try to focus on this eager young man from Yale, or is it Harvard? Fresh off my keynote, I wasn't paying attention, but it hardly matters. The doors start to close. Once we're alone, I'll slide my hand down his chest, check his badge, and use the lanyard to yank him in close for a kiss as we rise skyward to my corner suite. This train of thought is halted by the shuffle and clatter of drunk women in interview heels. A pair of assistant professors I recognize from the reception waves for us to hold the elevator, and my grad student, playing the gentleman, leans past me for the button. As the doors reverse their course, I note with displeasure more stragglers on the way. An elderly woman with a cane, a mother dragging a small boy. Not only do these newcomers promise to make my elevator ride with Harvard substantially less interesting, but their slipshod progress across the lobby is giving me ample time to reflect on the oddity of my first impulse, which was to ignore Gwen altogether. to pretend, as I was on the point of doing a moment ago, that I didn't see her, didn't know her, haven't spent half a lifetime trying to be her. But I have seen her, and I can't unsee her now. Yep.
You know, I just picked up on the fact that I hadn't thought about since I read the book. This is actually set in the spring of 2021, right?
Yeah, sometimes December 2021. I know. I hope everyone's back at conferences by then.
But, you know, alternate universes and something that was really, really jumped out at me. First of all, one thing I want to say, hearing that opening again, I'm reminded you did not leave a single thread dangling in this book. There's like nothing that is wasted. And I can't say more than that because everything is a spoiler after that. And by the way, I wasn't even looking for that. It's such a absorbing read that you're not, it so plays by its own rules that I think the reader enters it and it's just like, okay, I'm here. I just have to do what Amy wants me to do, and I'll gladly do it. I mean, it's just, it's like one of those books where you can't play that game where you're like, well, it's like this and it's like that, or if so-and-so had a baby with so-and-so, it would be this. To me, it seems really wholly original. And, you know, one of the things that I have to ask, I guess, is you have a PhD in literature. You wrote a dissertation on Henry James. I think I've got that right. Mm-hmm. So there's that inevitable question that I hate asking, and yet I know I have to ask it, which is, what brought you to genre? What drew you in? And we've hinted a little bit at the possibility of genre, but I'd like to know specifically your conscious decision to engage with a form that some people are unkind to, I guess is what I would say.
Well, first of all, those people, no, I actually, it's an odd story. I did not start out engaged with crime novels either, intentionally. Okay, I had read some of yours. I had read one or two of Megan Abbott's. I had read one or two here and there, but I was not a crime or mystery person. I did not think, oh, I read Barbara Vine too, and Patricia Highsmith. So maybe I did read some crime, but I didn't think of myself that way. I didn't like go out of my way to look at, to look at the market. The stuff that's marketed that way just didn't occur to me. But I was obsessed with Henry James. And when I first started writing my first novel, I really wanted it to be a Henry James novel, basically. And I have never stopped wanting that. And as ridiculous as it sounds, every novel is basically my attempt to write a Henry James novel. But you've seen what comes out. I mean, it's not really, but I think one thing I realized when I was in that first phase in Good Is Gone, which is my first book, and when I realized that there were dead bodies, it was a mystery, it was, in that genre, is I started looking back at all of the things that I had studied and seeing that, in fact, a Henry James novel is a crime novel, right? I mean, there's just the differences. There's a little tiny group of people trying to scam each other out of an inheritance, or they're trying to manipulate each other into marrying the wrong person, but they're playing mind games with each other. And there are often, some low-level crime or misdemeanor is actually in there, much as like, my first books that I became obsessed with in high school, actually Crime and Punishment was like my first like classic that I read and was totally into. I read it on my own and, got obsessed with it. And I think that does say something about where my heart lies in terms of stakes, and genre is largely to me a matter of stakes. The crime genre, the stakes are, death or perhaps, a huge theft of money or something like that. And in romance, the stakes are marriage and love. And, so I think to me, genres are much more so than by style, by subject matter, by anything else. Genres in like the true sense are kind of defined by the stakes for me. And so, yeah, that's where I landed, because I guess I just need something to happen in a book.
you just can't stop killing people. That's
yeah. I mean, who doesn't want that in grad school, out of grad school? Yeah.
I will tell you that one of the things I found researching that just cracked me up, because I had no idea this happened, which was you got into a kind of public feud with James Wood of the New Yorker. No. And at first when I found this, I thought, okay, that's just a funny column. She's just making that up. And then it was like, oh my God, no. James Wood of the New Yorker took time out of his life to not only email you, he's in the comments responding to everybody. And it's like, okay, I mean, I love the Austin Chronicle. I know many great writers who have worked there. But the idea that James Wood found, and he's not even really the point. You wanted to talk about, you had much bigger fish to fry, which is you wanted to talk about this idea, and this is, I want to go here. He had written something about how maybe, was he saying that writers shouldn't have families, basically?
I mean, it was such a frustrating article. You should go back and read it sometime, because later I went back to read it just to see like whether I had been unfair. And of course, anytime you take like a long New Yorker piece and reduce it to a one-line lead, like a punchline, of course you're going to be a little unfair. But when I went back and read it, I was like, no, I was totally right about that.
First of all,
the article opened, I think, with the question of whether you could be a good parent and a good writer.
That just blows my mind, because asking the question means you're definitely leaning into no, because it's not interesting to say yes. And I think this is
or no for some people, right? Like, who is it no for? Let's think about this real hard. Like,
I know today from reading Twitter, it's a no for Yves Lenoir, because he actually said he hated his children so much he made it a point to be away when they were home for summer vacation. I think I've heard anecdote in the Copenhagen trilogy. But okay, so we're both moms, and this is something we've talked a lot about. My daughter is 10 and your son is
3.
He's not young. Man. And, I think about this all the time, which is that my daughter is passing through right now and being very sweet. So it's like we kind of reverse engineered this idea of what is a genius. And we look at a lot of geniuses, and Picasso always comes to mind. It's like, Picasso is brilliant, no doubt. And he's a total asshole, and he's terrible to everyone. So therefore, that's an essential element of genius, when it seems to me it's so obvious that it's a little easier to do genius work if you don't give a shit about anybody, right? Sure. But it's not a requirement.
Is it though?
Correlation is not causation. And actually, maybe this is something that I really think, and it so ties into your book, where there's so much attention to who's a genius, who's the real genius, who's really a natural genius, who deserves to go forward, who's just someone who's like a little worker bee who maybe isn't good enough, and the way, in particular, this is important, the way that people of color are treated in higher education, and how they're perceived and slotted and, stereotyped. It's just such a big idea of, I can't, like the minute you ask the question, it seems to me, you're basically saying, can't we all agree that women with children could never do anything very good?
Yeah, because unless they're terrible mothers. I mean, don't forget, Laura, they could be a terrible mother, and that could be it.
I guess there'll be a Plath, and then you can maybe posthumously you can be recognized. I just find that such an interesting, maddening discussion. And when I was making the decision to become a mom, which I became a mom shockingly late in life, I kind of did this survey of crime fiction at the time. And so we're talking about, this is like 2005, I'm doing my personal survey of what happens to women who have kids. And the fact is, a lot of them were dropping out, but that's not true anymore. And that's been one of the most exciting things, which is that now there are more and more women who have families, who are raising kids and are writing crime fiction. And it's a really big, important change in my mind.
It makes so much difference in what gets written about, right? I mean, have you been noticing all of these books about postpartum depression and breastfeeding? And I mean, I just read one by Julia Fine that's coming out in like a week called The Upstairs House that's like all about postpartum depression and breastfeeding. And I was like, and you know, of course, she's getting all these reviews about how gross all the breastfeeding stuff is, but this book blew me away. It was amazing. And the thing is, I mean, that's a few lame men on Goodreads, but like women need to read this. I mean, women have had traumatic experiences around, you know, childbirth, around, you know, all kinds of aspects of women's experience that have just, I mean, nobody's ever written these kinds of horror novels before. So yeah, I think it's fascinating and amazing. I do talk to these women and am one, and and on you know, on DM, to be honest, a lot of us/them are kind of falling apart a lot of the time because it's freaking hard.
Right now is an incredibly fragile time, and what's happening to women in the workplace. New York Magazine has this whole section on The Cut devoted to what's happening to women in work, and you know what happens when women disappear from the workforce. And Hannah Rosen, who had written the book, I think it's 10 years ago, she wrote The End of Men. She came back and said, "Oh, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. It's not the end of men."
I knew it wasn't the end of men. I remember that book, and I was like, "No, not the end of men."
It's so interesting to me because for so long, the default in crime fiction was there's a sad white guy, and it's a sad white guy and a dead woman. And he either killed her, or he has to find out who killed her, or both. He's accused of killing her. But it was like, that was the story. And then, you know, Gillian Flynn comes along with Gone Girl, and she
bless her,
kicks out the windows, and she creates, and people are like, oh my God, it's really interesting. The majority of people who read crime fiction are actually women, and go figure, they're really into reading about women. And now we have these guys who are like, I can't get published. It's so unfair. I'm going to have to pretend to be a woman. I'm going to have to, oh God forbid, write about a woman. And it's just, you know, it's an issue, obviously, that I get very excited about. And Gillian has come along and said, why are we calling it domestic suspense? Why does it have to be a subgenre? They're just books that people want to read, because it turns out that these books are like highly relatable. And, you know, we were going to talk, I you know, wrote to you earlier today, I want to talk about, because this is a writer craft talk, I know, on some level. How are you doing with your focus right now? What can you focus on and what can't you focus on? And how is that a pandemic problem, and how is it just life?
Okay, that's a lot, but I think, okay, first, I just want to say thank you for bringing up Gone Girl and Gillian Flynn, because that book means the world to me. And it really did come out. I mean, like, I don't know that Good as Gone would have, you know, been picked up so fast. Maybe it would have eventually gotten published, but I don't know that I would have gotten like published like that, you know, if it wasn't for her and for that book, which I can go back and read again and again. It's one of those books truly that even after you know the twist, the book still works because its structure is absolutely sound, and it's saying more than it's saying, so you can read it multiple times. So anyway, yay to that. Cheers to that. But my focus right now is shockingly good for doing a book release in a pandemic. I think one weird counterintuitive thing that has happened for me in the pandemic has been, I guess, first of all, I'm coming out of the first 2 years of having, you know, my first and only child. So, you know, this was his third year, which is already like exponentially easier, at least for us, it has been. There's so much independence that has come, and that has helped a lot. But also, even more so, I mean, it was hard as hell. I mean, this past year for everybody, we had it really easy, but it was still hard as hell. And something about that hitting a wall just psychologically early on, and just being like, I can't do this. This is going to ruin me. I can't write. I was in the middle of a project I was really excited about. I thought I was going to have a draft by the end of last year, maybe even last summer. And, that went out the window. But instead, I found that I was writing whatever I wanted, like whatever I wanted. It just felt like taking off the brakes. And even with this book, this is, I think, a book where I was already, doing more of that than I had done in previous books. And I felt more like it was really, really every word is my own and comes from like my voice. And with the pandemic, even more so. I just, I started writing a horror novel. I started writing short stories. I've never really done that before. I have like more ideas right now that I know what to do with, and I don't have time to do a ton of steady work on them right now. But I think something about taking off the expectation that I would, like finish that draft, the kind of just the career rhythm you get into where you're like, this is how I do it. This is how I write the next book. And even just taking a pause from that, and also feeling like the world's burning down. So why not the hell, if not now, just write whatever the hell you want. Like early in the pandemic, do you remember when people were like, it's too soon to write about the pandemic? I hope nobody's writing about the pandemic right now because it's too soon. And I was like, please, like if there's any time for people to like, if you want to write about the pandemic, please do it. We're all going to be dead soon, yeah.
Have you started your next novel? So you started your next novel. You're working.
I started a couple actually. Yeah. But I have a horror novel that I'm like somewhat, I don't know, a third into, or maybe a little less than a third. I'll probably have to chop it off at the knees, and then I'll, the way you have to.
I really wrestled with, which is, okay, I'm going to write another novel. I just started a novel right around the beginning of the year. And it's like, when is it going to be set? And eventually I just came up with the idea of, well, what if it's set in the now, but it's not about COVID? It's like COVID's a fact of life. People are wearing masks. These all things are going on, but it's a different story that just happens to be happening now. And I mean, the weird thing is, and I've already written a novella that takes us on, which is already last spring, feels like a historical era.
Isn't that funny?
Like writing about what it was like to respond. There's quite a show going on in my house. Y'all have no idea. There's a little floor show going on with my 10-year-old.
Oh man.
So, thing and everything. But yeah, so I think it's a really interesting thing. I mean, I think there's this desire sometimes when something huge happens to want to get there and be the first one to write the definitive thing. And I don't think that's necessarily the best impulse. And this is about an Austin writer, so I think he's in Austin. Yeah, he's right. The best 9/11 book, to my mind, is Next by James Hines, which isn't about 9/11, but it's set in the post 9/11 world, and there's this weird sense of dread, and there's something horrible that happens at the end. And it felt like something, I love that book. And it felt like something that really synthesized a lot of things and didn't try to, I'm not big as a writer of like running straight at your target. When I teach, I sometimes tell students, well, it's a little more interesting sometimes to go around it and come at it aslant and not be so on message, like I'm going to tell you this. But which again, like when I read your book, you know how much I loved it. I've been pretty. You
can keep doing that. That's okay. I'm all right with that.
Actually, one of the things I loved about your book was that I was like, this is a book that I'm glad that an editor got it. And I love the fact that in the acknowledgments that you mentioned that you and the editor of this book you clearly met for the first time at BoucherCon in St. Petersburg. So that was 2000. I can't do math anymore. That had to be 2008.
It's the dark ages at this point, right?
but yeah, because to me, this is a book that you clearly have a really smart editor, because I can see a lot of not smart editors being like, where's the body? Like, what's going on? Why am I spending most of this book in a grad school program? But I think clearly you had a smart editor who really got it.
I had two smart editors that really got it. I was so lucky. I had one who acquired it, the amazing Helena Atzma, who then moved over to be at Echo, and she had one role, I think, in like helping me through the beginning, because I sold it on a partial, and she had, she, I think, was thinking some of the things that you're saying, but she believed in it a lot, and she believed that I knew where it was going. And as I gave her the first draft, and she did have, there were some edits, and some of which were, she's brilliant. Some of her edits were amazing. And some of them, I was like, I can see why you think this. I can see that you're diagnosing a problem, but I can't do that yet. And that it was actually extremely hard for me to say that. I think that's the first time I've really said no to, or at least not now, to edits from, that were big edits from someone I super respected and who was extremely smart and loved the book. And it was really hard to do, but I kind of knew what I wanted. And I was like, give me another shot at it. And she right away, being a woman of extreme experience and grace, was like, yes, let's not worry about it now. Like, you don't have to please me right now. As I think about the way that this book mirrors like where I was in my career, and how all my like grad school desire to please the editor as if they're my advisor or something. And this was the book where I really broke that and said, no, I think I know what I'm doing. Just give me enough time. And she said, take all the time you need. And by the time I was done, she had moved on to Echo. I took my time. And so Jamie Levine, who I was already friends with from meeting her at BoucherCon, multiple BoucherCons, and drinking and gossiping at the bar, and finding out that we had like shared so many tastes and we had so much in common, she was my new editor, and I wanted to throw a party. It's not often that you lose one you love and get one you love just as much. And in some ways, Jamie, who had kind of a background in the some of the same kind of university programs that I was in. She just got it right away. So yeah, she was great, and she polished it through the end phase. But yeah, thank you. That was a long story, but yeah, the edits were more important in a way on this book than they ever have been before, because I really had to like face what I wanted the book to be, and not really fight for it, but just speak for it, give it space.
But don't you think that is, in general, not to stereotype, kind of this particular female problem of, we want to please our editors, we want to be nice, we want to be well-behaved, and yet we're the ones who have the full book in our heads. And I've certainly had this moment. I've had the moment and I've been dead wrong, and I've had the moment and I've been right, where you say, trust me. Could you just trust me and see where this is going to go? Because I like I said, I've done it both ways, and I'm a total almost unicorn at this point. I have had the same editor for my entire career. I've been working.
That is something.
I'm on book 24, book 24 or 25, and I've been working with the same editor. But still, sometimes I still have to learn. I still have to learn to spend about 48 hours before I even respond to a note, because in the first 48 hours there's much furious walking,
right?
You don't understand me. And I do think that's something else that seems particularly female to me, where You know, it's like you want to please, but also you're the one who knows what you're doing, right?
Yeah. It takes a while. I mean, yeah, that the book is also about imposter syndrome to a large degree, you know, which certainly probably everybody in grad school, certainly every woman in grad school, I think, feels, and many women in their rest of their lives. Yeah, I think there's a reason we feel that way, and it's because we're used to being talked over, interrupted, misheard, not heard. We're used to having our quotes like when you're, I mean, I don't know how many times I was in grad school and I talked a lot. Okay, as you can tell. And I would, you know, raise my hand and say something. And then like 1 second later, someone like a dude at the end of the table would raise his hand and say the exact same thing. And when I talked, nobody answered. And then when he spoke, you know, the professor would be like, excellent point, you know, so-and-so. And then a bunch of other people would jump in and reply. And I just, yeah, is it any wonder that we don't really think we have something worth hearing, you know? And that's, I mean, I'm a very brash, ballsy Texas lady, you know, I don't have a problem speaking my mind in the slightest. So it was really quite like shocking to me to feel that way.
Yeah, no, and I've been thinking a lot because there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter today, a place where you and I both spend some time. And, you know, there are these men who were like saying, oh, you know, AOC they're mocking her for talking about trauma. I mean, Glenn Greenwald, like, you know, used like this little baby voice to make fun of her for talking about sexual. It's just like, I'm going to have to hear more about why you think it is unfair or manipulative of women to speak about the fact that horrible things have happened to them, and that you decide when those things are relevant and we're not using them to advantage.
Well, that goes back to women's stories and what we're used to seeing as a story that is worth telling and listening to and paying attention to, and what we're not, you know? Yeah.
I mean, but what's very interesting is that so much of what's blowing up on television right now is female centric. Yeah. And, you know, I was actually trying to explain Bridgerton to a man. I was actually trying to explain romance novels to a man. It was like, I said, well, see, here's the thing about romance novels that you don't understand, and that this is why they're very popular, and this is what they do, and this is the need that they fill. And now this fairly traditional romance series has come along with this, and it's just like, no, they're just glazed over. It's like, you know, it does count because they're not 20 people being murdered by organized crime, so it can't be art.
I mean, I remember a conversation I had with a guy that I was teaching. We were both teaching adjuncting in the same place, so we would always hang out in the teacher's lounge. And, you know, when he was like, oh, Jane Austen, bad writer, never read her. And this is a guy who was teaching undergraduates. And, you know, I just kind of laughed a lot. And then, you know, I was like, really? And I told him the same thing I tell my students, who were actually usually much more receptive. But, you know, I mean, Jane Austen may not feel high stakes to you because it's just about marriage, but let's talk about what the stakes of marriage are for a woman in, you know, 1806 or whatever. Like, let's talk about survival and how women survive. And a romance novel even today is kind of the descendant of that survival instinct, right? It's extremely important who women are falling in love with. It's one of the most, you know, political issues there is, and in terms of the effect that it has on a woman's body. You know, I mean, talk about like horror. We were kind of talking earlier about genres, and yeah, like, you know, pregnancy, childbirth, you know, and sexual assault, and all these other women's like experiences that are much more common to women can be written as pure body horror if you've got a mind to, and it's just a part of our personal life. You know, these are things that are just, you know, I mean, it's just pregnancy. That's just, you know, it's part of your intimate relationships and domestic world, right? So it can't be the matter of crime or high stakes drama, but it is. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my
No, it gets a little bit infuriating to sort of see what is classified as, and the fact that we even still talk about women's novels.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of these terms that we talk about, they're marketing terms. It doesn't bother me. You know, I am a crime writer. That's how I identify, and I don't, worry about those designations. I know some people who really chafe at them and are like, "Oh my God, I've got to get someone to call me a literary writer, or I'll just be so sad and I'll die." But I think we're coming up onto when we need to take questions. I should probably put that in the chat.
Oh no, I thought we were just gonna hang out all night, Laura. This is like the best conversation. I just want to keep having it.
It's almost like we're at BoucherCon.
I know it. That's exactly what I wasn't gonna say anything, but cheers. It's like we're both basically behaving like we're at BoucherCon. So
Becca, are you ready to start fielding us some questions?
I mean, not really, because I would rather listen to you guys talk. But the good thing is the questions are for you. So you'll be talking some more. Yeah. So we invited folks to send in questions ahead of time about craft or really anything that they'd like to. So we did get a ton, and I know that I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I'm gonna start with 2 questions that are specific. One is specifically for you, Amy, and then one's for you, Laura. And I thought, that seemed fair. So Amy, this is for you. In your acknowledgement, you mentioned that you had been weeding through an unruly timeline. I'm having a plot/timeline problem with the novel I'm working on. Would you care to offer a word or 2 of advice?
Get a good copy editor. I mean, I am just the worst with it. I cannot sort out timelines to save my life because I just care more about what's happening than when it's happening. And in the final draft, I mean, I do lots and lots of rounds of squaring things. This book was the hardest one because it has, I think, 3 or even 4 like different sort of loci of action where things are happening. A lot of things had to coalesce. So anyway, yeah, I actually kind of rewrote an entire timeline just in copy edits. I'm afraid I'm no good to you.
Do you keep you know what I'm saying, Post-it notes or
graphs, charts? Oh, Becca. Yeah, I'm not a plotter and advancer, so this is like a constant problem that I have, and I have just come to accept it. I used to be like, I need to learn how to outline better, and now I'm just like, I seem like I'm doing fine. Like, I just have to be okay rewriting giant chunks of text, and I am. But yeah, toward the end, I had to make a little chart, like a line. I have a ton of failed timelines, that I drew with like a bunch of little notches in them and like brackets all over the house. And my main problem was that I kept forgetting which one was which. So I was like, I have the one that starts in 1979, but it ends in 2021 but there were like so many factors that I would pick up an old one and think it was the one I was working with and have to do it all over again. So seriously, not a person to ask for advice, but I will take advice if people have it.
Well, because we got a lot of questions for it now. Right. Laura, I have a specific question for you. In Life Sentences, there's a tense dialogue around why do you get to tell the story? I think this sort of builds on some of what, even touching on what you guys were talking about. Have you been asked this question? If yes, what prompted it? If no, where did this scene come from?
I haven't been asked. Well, okay, there's one book in particular where people ask me, why did you get to tell that story? And it's What the Dead Know, because it was so obviously based on a true story. And people would say to me, did you ask the family permission? And I'd say no. And there are 2 ways to answer that. One is about why I'm a nice person, and one of them is about why I'm not such a nice person. And the first was that I'm not going to do that to the family. I'm not going to go to them and seek benediction, which really felt unkind and like oh, hi, I'm going to write this story that's about the worst thing that ever happened to you. Please tell me you're okay with that. But the second part was about not believing I needed to ask for permission. And my thinking on that has evolved a lot. Life Sentences would have come out in 2009, I believe. When I wrote Lady in the Lake is super meta because it is about a white woman who uses Black pain to advance herself. And I don't feel that I've specifically used Black pain. I mean, my books go back and forth. Baltimore is 2/3 African-American. To not write about Black people would be false. But I had to sort of recognize in myself and then in the character of Maddie that I write about pain. I write about things that are sometimes inspired by real things. And even if they're not, I write about death, I write about murder. And I wanted to sort of look at that and be like really honest about it. And, you know, Maddie in Lady in the Lake, she's kind of horrible, except I like her. But she's someone who is so careerist and is so focused on what she needs to get ahead that she moves to this city that's teeming with stories. And the only story she wants to tell is this. And by the way, why is she writing about the death of a Black woman? Because no one else wants to write about it, because it's 1966 and it's available to her because none of the men in her newspaper want to write about it. So this is a really, this is an evolving interrogation for me. I'm always thinking about the ethics of what I do. I think I'm constantly thinking about my responsibilities, writing about people who are not me, people of color, people of different sexual orientation. I think about this all the time, and a question that gets asked, I'll be at a writer's conference and someone will stand up and they're like, I was told I cannot do so-and-so. And the thing that you don't want to say, but you kind of have to say to people, are you sure you're doing it well? You know, why are you doing it? And I wrote about this for the Washington Post. I attempted to talk to some wonderful writers on this very topic. And basically these Black writers courteously and kindly told me that it was not their job to teach me how to do this. And I think about this all the time, but one of the writers in particular said, the main thing you have to think about when you're writing someone other than yourself is why. Why are you centering the story there? What do you hope to achieve or say? And it's, I mean, but, you know, I come back to, I just wrote a book. I mean, the book that's coming out in June, Dream Girl. It's basically inside the head of a white man, a terrifying place to be. And it allowed me to sort of be having all these conversations about, am I correct? Am I woke? Am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to say that? Which are all these things that men are complaining about out loud. And so, yeah, very long answer to say that I had those conversations as of 2009. I keep having them, and I'm just going to keep evolving to try to. I was listening to a podcast. I mentioned Maintenance Phase. I'm so in love with this podcast, and they did a thing on snake oil today, and they were talking about the Wild West shows, and you think, and they had this comment of, every time you look into American history, you find racism. You just do like, and I started thinking, oh, wow, you know, Annie, Get Your Gun, which is this musical that I love. And I saw in revival when I was 6 years old. It's based in this tradition of the Wild West show, and the Wild West show is racist. Now, what do I do with this information? Like, you know, I feel like we have a lot of people who are like, how dare you take away my innocent memories of childhood when I was pure and had no bad intentions? It's like, no. Just think about stuff. Just think about it more. Think about it harder. It's a lot.
Yeah. Wow. That was great. Thank you. Thank you for thinking that all the way through, from that question about, you know, about life sentences. It did occur to me while you were talking, though, about Lady in the Lake, that you both, because I read both of these books fairly back to back in preparation for hanging out with you tonight. And you both have these main characters who, if you're looking for someone to really cozy up to and feel the warm and fuzzies for, you're not necessarily going to feel for Maddie or for Max. And I am going to jump in then with another question we got, which is, what is in your head when you're writing a character that maybe, do you know from the outset that Max is going to be someone that it's going to take the readers may never root for, or they may, but that you're going to want to hang with her and be a part of her story? Maddie, the same thing. Like, what are you thinking? You
sound like my editor.
I mean, look,
where did you get this unrelatable character? How are they going to root for her, Amy? Give her a backstory.
Come on, you could not root for a character and want to be with them every step of the way, right?
That's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, I'm sorry, you can finish your question.
No, run.
No, it's been so funny. I mean, I say this about every book. It always surprises me. The thing is, guys, I'm going to lay it on the line here. The very first book I wrote was about a bereft mother and her abducted daughter. People found those women unlikable. You know, and they told me so in the Goodreads reviews. And I bless all Goodreads reviewers. You are all helping my algorithms. I thank you for buying my books and reading them. However, it never fails to astonish me. I mean, like, where is this likable paragon of humanity that you're reading books about? Like, where are these books with the likable characters? I have never read one. I don't know where they are. I probably don't like them when I read them, is the problem. I just find likability one of the least interesting qualities of anyone. And although it's, you know, a great and laudable quality for a friend, a mother, you know, I just feel like no one is actually likable in their head. Is the other thing. I mean, when you're narrating something from a first person point of view or a third person point of view, but it's from, you know, inside someone's head, or you have access to their thoughts, like, are you guys really so pure that you're never having like an evil thought against someone? I'm sorry, this is a real rant, Becca. I'm getting there. I'm getting to your question.
If you had told that novel from the point of view of Gwen, I mean,
yes,
you know,
okay.
Is
she likable? No, I mean, she's yeah.
I don't know. People like her.
I actually, you know, I did. I'm sorry, I just keep cutting you off, Becca, because I have so many thoughts about unlikability.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people find it hard to like women, and that's why they find many women characters unlikable. And I think that's more of a trait of the reader than the characters. But that said, I mean, I'm writing books about murder and bad behavior. So they're definitely going to be unlikable people doing, or at least people doing bad things. I mean, that's the other thing. I just don't find it inherently unlikable for someone to behave badly. I find those people fascinating and interesting. And I want to be inside their heads, understanding why and how they got to the point where they made those decisions. So for Mac, you know, I mean, I find Mac extremely relatable. I mean, for some obvious reasons, but also because, you know, like I said, I had that dream, and in that dream, I had that feeling. I got to be both characters, as you are in a novel or as you are in a dream. And I felt that, you know, hatred, and I just wanted to know where it came from. And so, you know, the novel was the long answering of that question of, how is someone driven to behave that badly? What would it take to push you all the way past just wanting to kill someone to doing it? And, you know, I mean, I think this is like part of a longer conversation, but I think if people had more of a nuanced understanding of why people commit crimes, and, you know, less of a desire to polarize victim and villain, and more of an understanding of that those things are situational, and that we would have a much more humane society. So that's why, all you Goodreads, no, Yeah,
I mean,
but so that's why I love Mac. I love someone who's driven also. I love Mac is somebody who is active. I mean, she is kind of stunned and watching a lot of the time, but she also like, she gets her money. Like she gets that job at that restaurant and she, you know, like gets into that program and climbs. And I think there's something about an active character who's, you know, that even if you're not exactly rooting for them because you think what they want is not really worthwhile, you want to see if they're going to get what they want. So anyway, that's all fascinating to me. And I find it likable when I read those characters. I like awful, awful women in my books and men as well.
Well, then I'll end the questions with, for both of you, someone else, and I'll never be forwarding the name of the person who asked that question to you, Amy Gentry, but someone else asked.
I was just blaming Becca. I think you, the innocent question asker, totally within your rights.
Somebody else asked, and I love this question. I think you tell me if I love it. Who do you like to read for inspiration or to better your own writing? So I just wanted to give each of you a chance to maybe give a shout out to someone who's not here tonight, who is a writer that's influenced you, or a particular book that means a lot to you in relation to your own sort of life as a writer and your writing life.
Wow. There's so many, and I'm going to leave people out. I'm just going to name two. Well, I'm going to name three. I'm good friends with Megan Abbott. I've read The Turnout, which is her book that comes out this July. She just always wows me. I mean, she's been so great from the start, and I've been a fan from when she first came on the scene. I'm also going to mention another friend because I really feel like she's carved out this unique territory. Allison Galen is writing a kind of family suburban story that there's no one else who does an Allison Galen book like Allison Galen does, but a writer who's just been super important to me on so many levels. And she's interesting because she begins as a literary writer. She sort of moves into genre, but she does it more successfully than most literary writers because she's not condescending to genre, but she's also just kind of cracking it open and making it crazy. Kate Atkinson. Mm-hmm. If you read Kate Atkinson's first novel, whose name just flew out of my head.
Behind the Scenes at the Museum, right? Yeah.
It's there's actually a mystery in there, and it's so beautifully layered in, and when the secret is revealed, you're like, oh, I was there all the time. So she had that instinct to sort of play fair. And then when she goes into writing the Jackson Brody books, which are about a PI, they're at once extremely reverential of PI conventions and also extremely willing to turn them on their heads and to have just like crazy coincidences, because life is full of crazy coincidences. And she gets to the point where she writes a novel in the Jackson Brody series, where he spends most of the novel in a coma, or you're just like, I just really, and she's now done speculative fiction, and she's so open and so interested. I could talk for 2 hours about the amazing people I read. There's so many good books. I'm just excited like every day right now to get up and read.
Awesome. Thank you.
That Kate Atkinson, definitely seconding the Kate Atkinson. That is, she's incredible. I've never really read anything of hers that didn't sort of blow my mind in some way and also please me deeply. You know, it's pleasurable as well as mind-blowing. So I love that. The original question was sort of, what do you read to kind of help better your writing or get back to your
for inspiration or
for inspiration
writing? Yeah.
I feel like it's a very boring answer given what I have just said, but I do actually go back to Henry James when I'm feeling sort of lost from my voice, and I have to be careful because he is also a very, very specific voice, and I'll get into that rhythm and start trying to write these like 20-page sentences, and I have to scrub that out, pretty assiduously. But I do find that nothing really stimulates the part of my brain that wants to write quite as intensely as Henry James. You know, I also, just the other day, I was remembering my love for Barbara Vine, the great late Barbara Vine / Ruth Rendell, but I have always loved the Vine novels more. And again, when I started, before I read a lot of crime or mysteries, my sister-in-law gave me The House of Stairs, and I read it and sort of, you know, I didn't even see it as a mystery necessarily. It was just an incredibly like lovely story. And so, yeah, I go back to her too, to remember the kind of like weird novels that I want to write, or just feel empowered to write whatever I want to. And that's another reason Kate Atkinson is such a brilliant thing to go back to too. I'll have to try that, because she just seems to be writing whatever the hell she wants to at any given time. And that is my goal in my career. I just want to be writing exactly what I want to at any given time. So.
Well, I think I'm speaking for everyone here on this webinar when I say that we want you to write whatever you want to at any given time. Really quickly, before we go and before I say an official thank you to our wonderful, wonderful folks, I'm going to pull some names. Amy from Melbourne, Australia. You just got a gift bag. You
That's
should.
Amy Suter Clark.
You're in freaking Melbourne, Australia. You deserve to win.
She's my agent sister and my editor sister. She has a debut coming out that's amazing. It's called Girl 11. Everyone should run out and put it on your pre-order list right now. It's great.
Gosh, well, you're about to wear some really snazzy glasses. Will you do that? Gogi Hale, Austin, Texas. You're a winner. And one more. I wrote everybody's names on these little tiny pieces of paper for you people. Let's find one more. Hillary Hug, Austin, Texas. Give us your email if you're still around in the chat box, or I'll find you. Don't worry, I'll find you. Laura Lippman, thank you so much for being a part of this and for being a part of what is such a big day. February 2nd. I don't know what that little groundhog did. I didn't pay attention to what don't no one tell me. But more importantly, February 2nd, Amy Gentry's book launch. That happened. An amazing book, a wonderful book that you guys are all gonna run out and buy and read, and we're thrilled. Yeah.
Can I throw in one last thing? Is Laura McHugh still in the audience? She keeps asking me to show the cake that I made for the Bad Habits cake.
Your cake.
Yeah.
And I have to say I can't bring the whole cake in, but I did bring a piece of it. I brought the most important piece.
Oh, it's the jacket of the book.
Yes. I did not actually, but so go to my Instagram and see all the pictures, because I put process pictures up too whenever I make a ridiculous cake. So, but yeah, that was just for Laura because she asked a couple of times if I was gonna eat it on the.
It looks amazing. What can we talk
just
about
for her
briefly? What's inside that cake? What kind of cake are we dealing with?
It's a red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting and a printed out edible image on top, because I just did not have time on my lunch day to hand paint an entire book jacket. But
amazing.
Guys,
thanks everybody so much for coming.
Thanks to
Becca. Yeah, cheers to you. Thank you so much, Laura. This has been amazing. So special.
You know, I don't do anything that I don't want to do anymore. So if I'm here, it's here. That's been my pandemic lesson. I say no to anything I don't want to do. And
life goals. Well, thank you. That means so much to me to hear. And thank you, Becca, too, and the Writers League. Y'all are just so terrific. BookWoman, please, if you haven't, order it from BookWoman. I'm still signing copies through BookWoman, so go ahead and order yours if you haven't. And I'll sign any of my books from BookWoman.
Oh, yeah, and I just want to say that my book plates were actually designed by Kaylee Simon, and they're lovely, and she's a graphic artist in Washington.
They're so pretty. I wondered.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Well, thanks for getting those to us too.
So
yeah. They're really, really pretty.
We'll send a link to the books again to everyone in an email tomorrow, but have a great night and take care
Good
of
night.
yourself.
I'm gonna go.
Night, night. Sleep well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.